Hi everyone, thank you so much for joining me. I'm really excited to get started with another live today. So just give me 1 second as I just put my other phone on record. So just give me 1 second and then I will grab our guest and I'll be right back. Okay, so if you guys can hear those sounds, there was some issue with the air conditioning in my room today, so that's why that's there. So we're just gonna try and ignore that. Okay, I think Umar is here. So let me just go ahead and grab him. Okay. They just walked out. So I'm hoping that it's a little bit more quiet now. Let's try one more time.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi. Hello. I'm good. I'm good. Can you hear me?
Everything is good.
Okay. I think this has become our ritual
Yeah,
before starting online conversations.
the technical issues come first and then we have
Yes.
the conversation. Okay, so I just want to introduce Umar to everybody. He is a writer. Last year he published a book which is based in Karachi and it is a sci-fi novel. So I'm really excited to speak to Umar about his book. First, Umar, can you just tell us how you got into writing and a little bit about your career, please?
Yeah. Before I begin, thank you, Usha, for having me on your live session. Um, Sorry, can you please repeat the question?
Yes, absolutely. I just wanted to know about your career and how you got started in writing.
Okay. So it all began in 2004. I wanted to write ever since I was a kid, but I think I wasn't able to channelize my feelings, and obviously I had no idea how to write in the first place. So in 2004, my father bought me my very first personal computer. It was Pentium 3, I still remember. And I was introduced to MS Word. And I think for a writer, MS Word has become their best friend. So I started writing, and I casually started sending my articles to various newspapers. Obviously, I had no idea how to write, how to edit. It all came through a process through time. But in 2004, July 2004, my first article was published in Young World. I'm still writing for this magazine, and that was the beginning. But I think until 2007 or 2008, I hadn't consider myself as a writer. I mean, that aspect of believability wasn't there. And in 2008, when magazines and editors started approaching me, then I thought, okay, I think this is something which I can do as my part-time hobby. And eventually, whatever jobs I did, they all were based on what I was doing as a freelance writer.
Perfect. So, can you talk a little bit about the idea for your book? How did you come about the notion of having like a sci-fi novel and then having it be set in Karachi? How did that happen?
So I was always fond of reading science fiction novels and watching science fiction movies. And I always wondered why these aliens or extraterrestrial beings never visit Karachi. They never come to Pakistan. Why? I mean, in every movie, the primary setting is either in New York or Los Angeles or London or maybe somewhere in South America. So I thought, let's write something. Let's write about sci-fi and put Karachi in it. And Karachi would not be the hero of the story, but still Karachi would have everything at stake. Because if the aliens do that, I mean, I'm not going to share any spoilers. So Karachi would be destroyed, and so I thought let's put Karachi at stake. Let's bring all the action between the humans and the ETs in Karachi, so that those who are living in Karachi, they can relate themselves to it. And people ask me, why haven't you written a book set in New York? Maybe it's the most popular place on earth. I said, look, I was born in Karachi. I was raised in Karachi. I know Karachi like the back of my hand. I can do justice with Karachi, and I can say to people that I live in Karachi, so I've written something about it. So it was pretty easy for me to integrate all those action scenes with the sights and sounds of Karachi, so that if someone does if someone discusses the book with me, so that I can easily tell them why or why not, was the rationale behind using or not using that particular scene. So that was the inspiration. And it took me around 10 years to complete this book. I started writing in 2009. Basically, this book was part of NaNoWriMo, which is a US-based creative writing project, National Novel Writing Month. And so I was one of the a few winners from Pakistan. So I started editing the book and drafting it, redrafting. Then, due to some personal reasons, I wasn't able to get back to it. But Allah ka shukar hai, by the end of 2020, the book was out.
So I just want to go back to something that you said, because I remember when we first spoke about having this live, you said that I wanted to bring aliens to Pakistan. So I'm curious, because you yourself just mentioned that a lot of your peers in the industry, they were asking you why not set this in New York. So I'm just curious, why do you think more Pakistani writers don't want to bring aliens to Pakistan? Why do you think they don't want to write sci-fi? Or if they write sci-fi, why do you think that they're insistent that it should be based somewhere else? Why do you think that is?
I think first, what I realized when I was doing my market survey before launching my book, that people, writers in particular, they want to follow the trend. I mean, if the trend is to write movies about Karokari, they're going to do that. If the trend is to write movies about migration, they're going to do about that. If the trend is to write about topics based on Pakistanis, American Pakistanis living in America, trying to find their identity. So I think a trend moves like a train, like a race, like a flood. So I never wanted to be a part of that trend, honestly speaking, and I wanted to create something that I could call mine. So I ventured into science fiction. Sidra Sheikh has written a novel. It's a sci-fi novel, The Light Blue Jumper. But her her book is set in a fictional universe, not in Karachi or any other city. But still, she did a commendable job. Usman Malik has ventured into science fiction. He has been writing science fiction, and his latest collection of short stories includes Karachi as a primary setting. So I think now people are very slowly venturing into it. But previously, I think they thought that it could be a risky decision in terms of people not accepting the idea, and also writers not being able to generate any sales. So, but I think the trend may be changing, and I hope that it changes.
Inshallah. So I want to go back to something you said. I know that you're very involved in writing. You've also taken part, as you mentioned, in international competitions. You won a few. Um, I earlier last year when I started these live series, I had another guest, and he is the owner of Black Sun Comics. They are a comic book, and he has like a publishing house based in Canada. And he particularly likes Afrofuturism. For those of you that don't know, Afrofuturism is basically a genre, subgenre of sci-fi, but also speculative, where the protagonists tend to be from an Afro-Caribbean descent. So I'm really curious to know, because when we look at sci-fi as a global genre, predominantly it's either, like you mentioned, set in the West, or the protagonists happen to be Western in some way, shape, or form. Even if it's a Pakistani person, it's Pakistani American. You know, it's not like very rarely do we see something coming out of here. Why do you think that is the case with global sci-fi? Why do you think that it is such a? I'm sorry. Why do you think it's such a niche, Caucasian friendly genre? People of color very rarely make it to that genre. Why do you think that is?
I think um, that's a pretty good question, and I think the people of color that challenge or crisis, you can say, it's predominant in every genre of literature, except for a few, like for instance Robinson Crusoe. That Afro-American character called Friday was a person of color, but still that person was a native, and that person was thought to be a bit suppressive than the main character. When we look at science fiction of today, then there's this actor Jamie Mackey who plays Falcon in the Avengers. He's a person of color. Then Black Panther, the entire movie is based on Wakanda and the native people. Men in Black, Will Smith is a person of color, and he was a lead character. So I think uh, there can be two aspects to it. Number one, if the story demands the writer or the director to cast or to include a person of character, or secondly, if they are willingly doing so. Until the time comes when the writer or the director wants to willingly add a main character as a person of color, we are still going to have speculation and questions. But I think again, the trend may be changing, because in Avengers, Falcon will initially become a lead character, and Black Panther is already a lead character. But in terms of sci-fi literature, much more work needs to be done. And I think with my novel Divided Species, with the main character being Ryan living in Karachi, a brown Desi boy, I think I may have hit the first nail in this coffin, and trying to bury this entire concept of not having people of color. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, my next question was about because I know that. So my live before yours was with Meher, and she was talking about the publishing industry in Pakistan. It's already an uphill battle trying to get a book published in this country. But when you are dealing with such an unorthodox story, when you are one of the very few, I don't know if after like there was the only, even if we talk about movies, the only movie I remember recently that dealt with sci-fi was Project Ghazi, and then it didn't pan
Hmm.
out. Right? So when you are such a rebellious writer, when you have such an unorthodox story, how do you find a publisher? How was that experience for you?
Okay, so writing a book is something completely different, and then finding a publisher is a totally different ballgame. It's like a cook will never sell their food until it's completely prepared. I mean, if you order McDonald's, they're not going to send you half cooked meal. They're going to cook it. So my advice to all those watching this, all those aspiring writers, first complete your manuscript. No matter how strange the story is, no matter how rebellious of a writer you are, first complete your manuscript, then see what kind of publishing houses are publishing books. They could be traditional, they could be self-published. The best way is to read newspapers that publish book reviews, because they also mention the name of the publisher, and then you can move on with your search. So when I ventured out to find a publisher, it was obviously an uphill task. A very big name, a traditional publisher, I'm not going to take their name. They refused. They didn't give any reason, but I know the reasons could be कि ये कौन पढ़ेगा, कैसे बिकेगी, ये तो हमने कभी छापी नहीं है, ये तो किसी ने लिखी नहीं है. So for me, self-publishing was the only option, because the author then bears the risk of getting the story published. So I was fortunate enough to find Arak Publishers. They are a relatively new publishing house, but they have been doing commendable work. But again, the advice would be to complete your manuscript, have a very close friend, a very trusted companion, read your book to fine tune it, because writers normally miss out on various loopholes. So once that is done, then start finding publishers. And traditional publishers के साथ आसानी ये होती है कि they do all the marketing work, they do all the labor work, but self-publishing platforms are also gaining speed and momentum in Pakistan.
So I know that you got some really good reviews in a lot of publications. How has the audience response been to the story? Because I know that the story itself, some of the themes are friendship, overcoming obstacles, things like that. It's the kind of story that most people would, they would like to read something like this. So how has the audience response been?
The audience response until now is pretty positive. I mean, even if I've got, I haven't received any bad review. Allah ka shukr. I've received feedback and recommendations on how to improve the content, or maybe the grammatical structure, or maybe something which I hadn't pointed out, which was important for a scene to complete. But until now, the book has been published, has been reviewed by all major newspapers of Pakistan, digital media outlets, and it was also a top Twitter trend a few weeks after it was released. Interestingly, a friend of mine bought that book, and he shared the book with his 7-year-old nephew. And he called me and he asked me a very strange question, which I thought a 7-year-old would never ask. He said, in the very last paragraph of the last chapter, you wrote something which means that there is either a sequel or a prequel to the book. And I told his chacha के भाई इसको जो है ना ज़्यादा मत करें, ये तो मेरे पोल खुल रहा है. So the reviews have also been positive, because I haven't used too strong of a language. The language is pretty simple. I tried to write it in a way that even a school-going kid can read it and understand it. And then the story isn't too complicated. It's more of a linear story with various subplots, but all of them are connected together. And until now, the reviews are pretty okay, and I'm happy with them.
Okay, so I just realized that we didn't give people a synopsis while we began this interview. So I'll just tell you. In fact, you know what, Omar? Why don't you tell us what the story is about? We're not going to give any spoilers, but why don't you give them a brief, overview of what the story is?
Okay, so I'm going to share what the book's blurb offers, because that is something which everyone has read, and without giving any spoilers. There is this real life constellation. It's called the Cygnus constellation, in which there is this fictional planet called Arplon, and there is this race living on it. They are called the Talikans, and in 1857 they buried a mineral resource in Karachi. At that time, it was subcontinent, and they had no idea that years later this place would become Karachi. So the reason for them to bury that mineral resource was because they were having this civil war on their planet, and they wanted to keep that mineral resource safe. That resource is called hextanlo, which is more like petrol to them. And they trusted a human. They assigned a human to protect it, but something happened that human wanted to use that hextanlo for his interest. And at the on the planet Arplon, there are two commanders, Kropnok and Gustan. Gustan wants to unearth this resource, and he knows that the radiation can kill every human, and it can destroy plant life. But General Kropnok wants to protect the city. So this is where the title came in, Divided Species. We have two species, extraterrestrial and humans, and both of them are divided internally, whether to save Karachi or whether to destroy it. So and then those Talican species send a team of researchers to Karachi to find that resource, and they befriend Ryan, who lives in. I'm not going to tell the name of the place. People should find it out themselves. And then this human alien friendship turns into kind of a mission to find and save, find that resource and save Karachi. So this is the most I can give out right now.
Okay, I think that's perfect. I think that gives people everything. And for those of you that are wondering, the book is available on Liberty as well. It's also on a bunch of different platforms. I think the best thing to do would be you go on over to Umar's profile. He'll have a link to his website. You go to his website, and then there's a lot of information about where you can find it if you're in Pakistan or if you are watching.
Just to sorry, just to add, the book is available on Amazon, and in Pakistan it's available at Liberty Books, as you mentioned, and also on the website of Aura Publications.
Okay, perfect. So also, I just wanted to ask a little bit. Typically, I find with Pakistani audiences, we are a very opinionated people, right? If someone gives us a story, we won't look at just the character arcs and the progression. We'll actually be like, this should have happened like this, right? There shouldn't have been one protagonist, there should have been 10. Like there should have been X, Y, and Z, like the aliens should have looked like this, whatever. Did you find that penchant for like telling people how to think or what have you, did you find any of the audience reactions to contain that? Did you experience that when you released your book?
Um, I think as a society we tend to become a bit judgmental when we are watching a movie or maybe reading literature. I find it quite annoying that if we watch or read American literature or movie, we don't try to pinpoint those loopholes or flaws. But when we're doing the same with our books and movies, we try to comment कि इसको ऐसे होना चाहिए था, इसको ऐसे नहीं होना चाहिए था. In my case, I only got one or two reviews. They weren't bad reviews, but they were feedbacks which I can incorporate in my sequel if it ever comes. That the aliens should have had the ability to connect through telepathy, because they're aliens and they can do that. Maybe that is something which people normally think about aliens, but I personally never wanted to include it. I had thoughts of including this in the storyline. The reason being that I wanted the aliens to endeavor to struggle to make an effort, not just stand somewhere and just think what the other alien is doing. So to explain that narrative journey of the aliens from going from one place to another, and to enduring that struggle, I think physical movement and action was necessary. But maybe if I ever write a sequel or a prequel, I'm going to keep this in mind.
Perfect. So, with that, I also wanted to ask a little bit about your inspirations. What other books did you read that you drew inspiration from? If you could give us some names, maybe.
Uh, I was always inspired by Ibn Safi. who used to write science fiction. He was a Pakistani author. He also wrote a series of Inspector Jamshed by Ishtiaq Ahmed. And Ishtiaq Ahmed himself was a science fiction. He wasn't primarily a science fiction novelist, but he incorporated ideas and elements of science fiction. Then I really enjoyed reading उर्सुला ग्विन द लेफ्ट हैंड ऑफ डार्कनेस, जिनका मैंने कोड अपनी बुक में भी शामिल किया है. She talked about this AI creature, android kind of a human being who becomes an ambassador of the universe, and he goes to another planet for peace building, but he cannot understand cultural stimulus, and then things go very. Then there was this novel, Neuromancer, in 1985, written by William Gibson. It's a story about a hacker who goes into a matrix, and these were kind of an inspiration. Then Mary Shelley's Frankenstein was another science fiction classic. But I was really inspired by Men in Black. It was released in '97. The reason being, I wanted to create a science fiction story in which the aliens are disguised as humans and they are living in a city with humans, but they reveal their true identity only when they're compelled to. So Men in Black had that, because all those aliens, they were disguised as humans. All the other movies, Aliens or Predator or any other, they all incorporated aliens in their true form, which kind of dulls out the main objective of human alien relationships. So I think these were my biggest inspirations until now.
So that's really interesting, and I want to jump on from that only, because I find that in a lot of sci-fi fiction, you tend to have some where the alien species are not really given any humanoid, not just characteristics, but even the way that they interact with each other. We don't know what their motivations are. There's no conflict. There's no morals. So in your book, as you have mentioned, that was a big part. Like, there is this whole moral dilemma, which is basically what's moving the action forward. Why did you want to have that kind of a representation of aliens? What drew you to that?
Look, whenever we are whenever we are in a tussle or in a fight between two groups, then they should be balanced. I mean, horses can win against horses. Horses cannot win against. Donkeys cannot win against horses. They can win against donkeys, and so on. So, had I incorporated those aliens being just aliens, killing machines, coming to Karachi for resources, then the humans would already have an edge over them. So I wanted them, the extraterrestrial beings, to be advanced in terms of technology, and also have the same emotions, so that I could relate humans' emotions with them, because all the good aliens from that side who are trying to help the people of Karachi fight against their own kind, there had to be some kind of balance. There had to be some kind of chemistry, and I also wanted to share that emotions aren't only limited to humans. Even animals have emotions. I've seen a cat crying because her owner died. And when you talk about aliens, then obviously there are different beings. I wanted to incorporate the same emotions as them, so that I can create a very smooth balance whenever the aliens and the humans are interacting in the story.
So from that, I also wanted to ask you, I find that in some genres, for example, I'm a horror fan, for those of you that don't know. I find that in horror, there are certain themes you can talk about because the whole concept of horror is to make you uncomfortable. So for example, if we talk about a couple of years ago, it came back in like the public zeitgeist in like a big way, because we had this amazing movie, and it was so much about child abuse. Like, the theme of child abuse was so clearly throughout, and the reason that you could talk so openly about it is because it's meant to be uncomfortable. It's a horror movie. You're not supposed to be, it's not supposed to be cookie cutter. Everybody's not
Yes.
supposed to like it. So what themes do you think you were able to explore because you had opted for sci-fi as a genre? What were some things that you could talk about openly, which you don't think you could have mentioned had you gone in, for any other route?
I think as far as the themes that I've explored, I haven't explored all the themes in detail, but still there were themes of leadership. There were themes of grief because General Kropnop, who is also the commander of the mothership that is hovering near Moon, he was blamed for his father's death because his father was trying to save him, and then he died in the process, and then he had to live with that grief. And there is a theme of sacrifice where this villainous character sacrificed his life so that his fellow colleagues could live and move on and complete their mission. And then there is this theme of friendship between these two interspecies narrative. I wanted to delve on more on leadership because Commander Kropnok assigned the entire mission to his subordinate. His name is Delitin, and he thinks that he's unable to work at such a high position at such a delicate task. But the commander then sits with him, and then he says that you were born in a military family, and that you have to take up this task. And then there is this theme of love between Ryan and his love interest. And then there is this connection between Ryan and his sister Faiza. They have a love-hate relationship, which siblings do. So instead of focusing on one theme, I covered various themes with the main idea of science fiction remaining the hero of the story throughout.
Perfect. So finally, I wanted to ask you, because I know that a lot of us that want to write, and especially, like you mentioned, it's a process to actually write an entire book. There's a lot that goes into it. You yourself mentioned that this book took you 10 years. There are lots of people who might want to write, but they are being discouraged, perhaps by family members, teachers, what have you, like well-wishers, people who, it's not coming from a bad place, but they're telling them that you're wasting your time, you shouldn't do this, whatever. What advice would you offer them?
I think my advice to aspiring writers would be to keep reading. There's this proverb that practice makes a man perfect. So the practice to write better is not writing; it's reading, because we tend to rewrite or maybe how can I say, we tend to use the same words to express our own thoughts. So the more you read, the more content absorption that you go through, you are able to write better. Uh, my advice would be to keep reading, number one. Number two, to keep exploring the local Pakistani publishing industry and try to figure out what kind of books are coming out more occasionally, which topics are left out. They could be horror, they could be fantasy adventure, they could be science fiction. Try to find out which genres are not being written about and try to write on them, because if there is a genre which people are not writing about, then that genre has more room for exploration. And whenever an aspiring writer goes to a publisher, then they should have a manuscript ready and work on your vocabulary. Read thesaurus every day, read opinion articles, editorials. I always encourage aspiring writers to read that, because editorials are like 400, 300 words long, and they explain the gist of the entire message. And be yourself. Do not try to be a voice of a writer you like. Try to create your own voice. I still remember reading and reviewing your book on the Pakistani cinema, the pop culture junkie. I believe that was his name. And I still, whenever I'm in a discussion and I have to talk about Pakistani movies, the first thought comes that Usha Kazi wrote this book because she had her own voice. The way you narrated horror in Pakistani industry, action in Pakistani industry, that was your voice. So every author should have their voice. They should be, I mean, Harry Potter, J.K. Rowling has her own voice. Dan Brown has her own voice. Ibn Safi, no one can replicate the way he wrote. Ibn Ansha, Patras Bukhari, Qudratullah Shahab, you have to create your own voice. Until then, you will just be a writer. But if you have your voice, if you have a signature voice, which comes through practice, which comes through writing, even if your articles are not being published, keep writing because one day they will. And secondly, one important thing which I wanted to share that people, when I was working on my novel, a friend of mine asked कि यार पाकिस्तान में तो इसकी मार्केट ही नहीं है, ये कौन पढ़ेगा इस तरह से था. मैंने कहा कि देखो मार्केट जो है ना वो बनाने से बनती है. इसकी छोटी सी एग्जांपल ये है कि जैसे वी हैव दीज वीकली बाजार, इतवार बाजार, हफ्ता बाजार, बाजार. On any day, that place would be an arid region, but on a specific day when they have to create a market, everyone from far flung places can also come and buy things from there. So you have to create your own market, take some risks, but take risks after doing a survey, after you're sure that, okay, this is going to work, this is not going to work. But to become a writer, reading is the most important thing. Aspiring writers can also create their blogs, start writing short blogs every week, ask friends to edit, ask friends for their feedback, and then they can take the process further.
Perfect. Thank you so much for joining me, Umar, and thank you for saying those lovely things about my book. I really appreciate it. As I mentioned to everybody, please go ahead and find Umar's book. It is on Amazon. You can find it on Liberty Books, and then if you go to Aurak Publishers, either their page, which I will link here, or if you go ahead and find them on their website, you can find the book there as well. It's lovely speaking to you.
Or they can visit my website, Moi Writes, MOI, which is Muhammad Umar Iftikhar, MOIWRITES.com, which has all the information and links there.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Umar. It was lovely speaking to you. I hope.
Thank you, Usha. Have a nice day. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, everyone. Please support writers in Pakistan.
Thank you. Allah Hafiz.
Hafiz.